had 13 years in graduate education, little over 5 years where I was the director and worked with admission committees to try and craft their incoming class. Before that, I had some experiences working at in a registrar's office. But my initial right out of grad school experience was I worked with a student development office at Clemson University, followed by housing at Stockton. So I'm very excited to be here and hope it can be very candid as we begin our presentation.
Yes, awesome. So we're going to be using a platform called Menti.com. So you all can either follow along on the screen. So I'll be sharing my screen, or you can actually go on to Menti.com and use our code. We will be having some interactive pieces during tonight's program. So I definitely recommend try using the code that we have here so that we can get some responses from you. So you can do this on your phone. It's very easy. It's very similar to Kahoot, or you can use it on a desktop. So we'll give you a second to join using our code. Yes, so I see someone's already liked one of the slides. So if you're using it on a mobile device, if you scroll down, you'll see that there are different options. So you can heart, question, thumbs up, thumbs down, each of our slides. So if you do have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat. We'll stop to answer those. But if you also have a question about a slide, you can just click on that icon or the reaction of the question, and we'll stop just to give you a second to just share what your question is. But we'll get started. I love these reactions.
So a lot of what
Sorry, go ahead.
So a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is why would we get a graduate degree, choosing the right program for you, just determining that maybe not all programs are offered at all schools. It'll be something that we'll discuss. We'll talk resources. I'll share with you admission requirements and applying, things you should and shouldn't do. But I want you to know that a lot of this comes about as a result of my own experience for grad. As a first generation college student, we often think, well, I already have a degree, so I know what to expect. But as a first generation undergrad student, I became a first generation master's student and a first generation doctoral student. So we have to keep that in mind as we go along the way. So we'll talk about things you ought to know, but you might not ask. We could talk about funding. We could talk about just about anything that you'd like that deals with the realm of graduate education. But we're going to talk from a global perspective. I'm not taking a Stockton point of view when we speak tonight. So we want to gauge what graduate degrees and programs you're interested in.
I think that this is a very tough question sometimes, right? Especially if we don't know what we want to do, but feel free to just type in maybe even your interests. Awesome, we have some coming in now.
All right, excellent. So let's talk about why we should or shouldn't go to graduate school. In many cases, you're going to have some sort of a passion for a topic, or you might have heard that I need this degree in order to become a, and then you could fill in the blank. It could be like something like physical therapy, or it could be a dentist, or it could be, I want to be a counselor, or I want to work with, and then you fill in the blank and we want to look into a program. Maybe you enjoy research and creative activities. Most programs are going to have some sort of a capstone experience, so research would become really important. Maybe you're interested, okay. The next one was if you're interested in a program that requires a grad degree. I touched upon that. You want to ensure continuing career advancement. I know that when I went from my master's degree, I thought, oh, that's the end of that. But I had to get the doctoral degree in order to continue on. So career advancement would be a consideration, and you want to earn more money. Reasons not to go. We don't want to go if we have to please someone else. We don't want to go because there's pressure to achieve something, because that adds extra pressure to being a graduate student. Suppose you don't know what you want to do, then we want to explore what programs or what your interests are before you determine that you get yourself into a program, because that could have different ramifications. And maybe you're trying to avoid a job, or you want to put off student loans. Those really aren't great reasons to go to grad school. We could think of some others. So I believe in my heart, with all my years of experience in doing that, is that there is a graduate program out there for everyone. And I'll use something like, let me use a communications disorders as a description. So maybe you live in an area like South Jersey, or in a metro area, Philadelphia, New York, Pennsylvania, and we decide that we want to go to grad school, and there might be quite a few programs out there. But maybe the program that you really want is at Stockton, and Stockton gets, say, 300 applications, but they only have 30 spots that you're competing with. When you decide to move outside of a radius of a population density into a maybe something a little bit more rural, or across the country in other places, maybe where not everybody wants to move to, sometimes your chances will increase. So determining where you want to go. Some people say, I did my one program on the East Coast, I want to now move to the West Coast, or I did something in the North and I want to go to the South. So there's all kinds of choices there, but I do believe there's a program out there for everyone. So the next slide shows the annual earning of workers 25 to 64. That was done as part of the Condition of Education 2020. So I grabbed this slide in early September, and it shows you what, over time, what the average earnings would be. So you can see from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, a master's to a professional degree, and then a doctoral degree. Your professional degrees will be things like dentistry, physical therapy, sometimes, well, occupational therapy can still be a master's, but there is a doctoral program in that as well. But that's considered a professional degree. And then this one looks a little bit tough to read, but this is weekly earnings that rise with educational attainment. So the more degrees or programs that you have, the higher your weekly salary is going to be. And the bar all the way on the right starts at 2,000, it ends at 2,000. So it would be, it's 0, 300 along the bottom, 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000. And you can see what it creeps up to be. And then this next one is the percentage of labor force by occupation and educational attainment at about the 25 years or older. And you can see that the different colors represent management, sales, service. So these would be where in the labor force you are and what sort of degree people may have. So if we look down, take the master's column, you'll see that management and professional is purple, which is more along the lines of more on the management side. All right, what should I consider when looking into a program? I want to consider my professional goals or my personal goals. I want to understand what the jobs, I always say go out and look at what people are doing in the field that I aspire to be and see what sort of educational credentials that they have. I want to understand what my financial situation is. Unlike the undergrad degree where there may be different grants and free money to go, it's very difficult these days to obtain that same kind of monies on the grad level. And we could talk a little bit more in detail about paying for it. And then what are your passions and your interests? If your passions and your interests are in counseling and you really want to get into counseling, then I would say that's a great place to begin looking into a program of study. So getting started. So what discipline do we want to look into? And you can use a variety of different tools to look at different disciplines. Sometimes just your simple job postings to see what people are obtaining their degree to come to. You could look at areas of interest. If you're looking at going into something like psychology, then do you want to do social psychology, or do you want to do child psychology, or do you want to do, there's a variety of different things you can look into. You want to discuss your career options and your interests, and you can do that with advisors. If you're a Stockton student, the Career Center would be a great place to go. Talk to your preceptor or your advisor. Professors are a really good choice of people to speak to because they've had that lived experience of wanting to study something. You could go online and do some research into career opportunities. A great underused resource, just because I think people don't know what it is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So you can type in, I just did this with working with some academic programs right now, and we were doing things on what would the job market be for, say, like a theater tech. So I could type in theater technician and it'll come up and it'll give me an idea of what the background salary would be, what the job earnings will become, and what sort of degree I may need. And then you need to finally talk a little bit about the type of degree eventually when you know what discipline you want to be in. If I use occupational therapy as an example, an occupational therapy on the master's level is the same job opportunities for one on the doctoral level. The doctoral level would open you up more for things that you could pursue maybe along the lines of teaching on the college level, but both if you just wanted to be practicing as an occupational therapist, a master's or a doctoral would be sufficient. Now I'm going to caveat that with if the professional association, like something like physical therapy did about 15 years ago, where they came down and said the new terminal degree for our program is going to be a doctoral degree, and then people were transitioned and had to go into that doctoral realm in order to continue career advancement.
Awesome, thank you. So some things to consider when you're choosing a program from an academic point of view. So does the curriculum provide a well-balanced representation of relevant subject disciplines? And when we're talking about that, we're talking about the content and the curriculum. So I think it's so important to look at curriculum when you are applying to graduate programs or looking into graduate programs, because what makes a graduate programs different from others is the content curriculum, the faculty. So that's going to make your program unique. So those are very important things to consider from an academic stance. And the faculty, do they have the professional experience outside of the academic community? Are they well known? Have they recently published anything? I know when I was looking into graduate programs, that was like faculty was so important to me because I wanted a diverse staff, right? Diverse faculty who would be able to provide me with not only the knowledge and skill set needed for higher education, but also for me particularly, I'm very interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I wanted to know like how well versed was the faculty in DEI. So that was super important for me. Talking to advisors, I know Dr. Glass shared that when you're looking into programs, oftentimes you are able to sit into a class. So you would have to connect with the advisors of the program or the program coordinators, but they are able to allow you to sit into a class so that you get more of a personal experience on like what it means to be a student in that program. So for me, that was very important as well. Also, how long is the program? How many credits are required? The same program can vary in credit hours from one institution to another. So that's so important. I want to say a year and a half into my program, they actually changed the credit requirement. I was grandfathered into the credit requirement from when I originally started, but that's important and something to look into because when we're talking about more credits being required for a program, that means more money, that means more time. So you want to make sure that you are like committed to the credit hours, you're committed to that program. And so it's important to understand what it entails when you're looking into each of the programs. Also connecting with graduates. I know oftentimes they have a alumni session where you're able to connect with alumni from that program and just see what kind of jobs are they in right now. Is this something that's aligned with your career and professional goals? So I grabbed this quote because I thought it was like, it just like really resonated with me. So it's more important to apply to a graduate program where you are competitive and that supports your specific goals while meeting your personal needs. As an undergrad, I don't think I even knew what my personal needs were, but as a graduate student, understanding what my undergrad experience looked like and what was needed and where was the gap was so important for me to identify. So when I was applying to graduate school, I went to a very big undergrad, a very big undergrad institution. And so I knew that wasn't for me. I knew I needed something smaller. I knew that the faculty to student ratio for me, I needed it to be something a lot smaller. So uh, again, this was very important to make sure that the program I was applying to fit my personal needs along with my professional goals. And some things to consider when you're choosing a program from a social point of view. Studies show that when students feel more socially integrated, this will positively affect retention, graduation. So it's so important to acknowledge that social integration is a big piece of all of our programs, right? So as an undergrad or a graduate student. So do you want to attend a large institution, a small institution? Where geographically do you want to attend a school at? Would you be okay with an urban setting area? What activities or programs are offered through your graduate program? Is there housing? Sometimes, graduate students need housing. So is there housing available for you? And how difficult is it to find off-campus housing? I think it's important to get like that student experience when you're thinking about it from a social point of view, just to understand what their experience looked like and what challenges and successes you may have or face. Then things to consider from a financial point of view. What is the cost of the program? So what I was sharing earlier, when you're looking at credits, if your program requires more credits, that means more money. So you want to make sure that you can financially afford the program that you are applying to. The cost is so important because, as Dr. Glass shared, as an undergrad, you receive grants. And there are different awards you can apply to. There's a ton of different benefits financially as an undergrad that you don't receive as a graduate student. And so one of our first slides said the reason to not go back to school or to apply to a graduate program is because you are avoiding a real job, or you just think that more education will solve your problem at figuring out what you want to do. No, that is not why you want to go back to graduate school. You want to be sure that this field and this program is completely aligned with your professional goals. Because if it's not, then it will just be a waste of money and time. So again, you want to consider the cost of it, even the cost for books. So as an undergraduate, my books were very expensive. But what's nice is that with my graduate programs, we have a like exchange of book option where students who are in the cohort above me will exchange books with us. So if I was taking a elective and they needed the book for an elective, they would give me one of the books from one of the core courses that they took. So that was really nice. And I think it helps build community and then just connecting with them on like what they learned from that course that they took. So that was very helpful in building just connection and community with other students in the program. Also, so you want to look at financial assistance that is available at these institutions. So are there assistantships? Are there loans that you'll be eligible for? Fellowships? So you can fill out a FAFSA form and they will share with you if you're eligible for any loans. However, there are other forms of financial assistance.
I was wondering if you could sorry. I was wondering if you could go over the difference between a fellowship and an assistantship.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Glass, do you want to take over?
So typically an assistantship is going to be something where you may have been given credit. And let me talk about it from Stockton, and then let's talk about it a little bit more global. So at Stockton, you would be given a certain amount of credits to work with a academic program, or maybe an academic department, or maybe a department in student affairs. And as in an exchange, you would be working with either a faculty member or a staff member working so many hours for those credits. They're not things that you have to pay back. It would be kind of an in-kind service. A fellowship, the fellowships that Stockton has are on the research side. So if I wanted to work on a research project with a faculty member and I was really excited about something and someone shared my interest in some sort of research, I could apply for a fellowship, which is like a grant of like $2,000. I do the research, I receive the money. Even if I'm not published, I get to keep the money. So that would be some of your differences. Now, depending upon where you go, on the master's level, my assistantship covered everything but books and, let me think, books and student fees. This is going back to the old days. There's not as many of those assistantships around today as there was back in the old ages. But an assistantship could also be, you could have a teaching fellowship or a teaching assistantship. So it depends upon what they're called at different ways. But in most cases, somebody's helping you pay for your way through school. When we talk a lot about the financial piece of it, the thing I always get confused about or I get concerned about is when folks who are maybe older or wiser than us, maybe more seasoned, I guess is the word people like to use, and they say things like, don't go to graduate school until your employer pays for it. Well, unless you're going into education or healthcare, and then you want to give so many years of experience back, most employers are not paying for it today. So that's a misnomer that's out there in the field. They used to say that a lot in the business community. Amanda, what do you think?
I completely agree. I love that you touch on the misconception that you shouldn't go back to school until you have an institution that will pay or a job that will pay your program fully. So I can just share what my experience looks like. So my job does not offer tuition reimbursement. I work for the National Society of Leadership and Success. So they do not offer tuition reimbursement. However, we do get $2,000 for professional development. So what I did was I actually submitted a proposal that shares that the class that I was taking, it was a community college course, and it was about $2,500 for that course. And so what I shared was what I'm learning and the learning outcomes from this course is directly aligned with what I'm doing professionally. And it also gives me an edge on understanding community colleges from a different stance, right? So I'm not only working with them, but now I'm understanding like what kind of campus culture looks like, right, for those community colleges. So when I submitted this proposal, what was really nice is that it opened up the doors for other colleagues to submit proposals to get tuition reimbursement. So it's not called tuition reimbursement, it's called professional development, but they did grant me the $2,000. I do have to submit a proposal every semester on just like how the classes that I'm taking are aligned with what I'm doing professionally for my career. But again, I think it's very important to understand the opportunities and resources and benefits at your job, because look at how I was able to turn a professional development opportunity into tuition reimbursement. So, yeah. Any other questions? I saw, so Maya, were you the one who questioned the slide? Yeah, okay, awesome. We'll go on. Okay, so admission requirements. So this is typically like what you're going to see when you're applying to graduate programs. Most admission requirements look very similar. So they're going to ask for GPA. GPA is super important. Competitive GPAs, you're looking at anything above a 3.3. That doesn't mean that if you have below a 3.3, you won't be accepted into programs. That's just what a competitive GPA looks like. And so it's also important to understand, are they asking for my cumulative GPA? Are they asking for my GPA that only applies to my my specific major? So you have to make sure that you're reading and understanding what GPA they're requiring. So they will also ask you for your transcripts in addition to your GPA, but just make sure that you are understanding what GPA they're talking about. And then most programs require GREs, your MATs, GMAT scores. I know that a couple of programs have actually waived those fees, and there are opportunities for you to take your GREs virtually. So those are just new options that have come up because of the pandemic and this virtual space. So I would just connect with the program coordinator if you're unsure of if this program requires you to take any kind of standardized test. So the website may look very different than what the requirements are. Again, because standardized testing is, it's really 50-50 right now. So I would definitely connect with the program coordinator to just 100% confirm if it is required for admissions. Letters of recommendation. So it's interesting that we're discussing this today because I actually got a request for a letter of recommendation. I'm going to tell you what he did wrong, and then I'm going to tell you what he could have done better so that you all don't make the same mistake. But letters of recommendation, so important. When should you start building those relationships so you can request those letter of recommendation? Today. If you didn't already start, you should be doing that right now. Attending office hours to connect with faculty, and even like connecting with, if you have an on-campus job, so any work study programs, connecting with your supervisor, talking about your goals. I think that's so important. Sharing. What are your goals? What do you want to do? When you put it out there, then that provides someone else with the opportunity to connect with you. And if they have any resources or connections, that's where it starts. That's where you begin those like vital relationships. So talking about your goals. Personal statements. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks when writing your personal statements, and then adding in any research or relevant professional experience that you may have. And so this is a poll question. So who should not write my letter of recommendation? Family, faculty, direct supervisors. I think this is a pretty easy one.
I got to add to that though.
Yeah,
You
I
can't
know.
write your own letters of recommendation either. That's a big no-no and gets you immediately a negative admission letter, is by writing your own, because you are wonderful, but you can't write your own.
Yeah, for sure. And so letters of recommendation, who do you want to ask for your letters of recommendation? You want to ask anyone that you've done research with, faculty advisors. These are perfect people to connect with when requesting letters of recommendation. Faculty members that you have relationships with that maybe advised a student organization that you were a part of. So these are just ways to connect with someone who can share what your skill set is and write you a strong letter recommendation, right? So if they don't know what your skills are or what your accomplishments are, then they're not going to be able to write you a letter recommendation that will be strong enough to attest to your skills. So it's so important to make sure that you're connecting with someone who knows you and you have a relationship with, because that individual should be able to provide you with detailed insight on your strongest qualities. And so quick share out. So letter recommendation, I had a student connect with me today. So the student was asking me a general question about our program, so the NSLS at his campus. And so he was just asking me a general question, and this was months ago in November. And so this morning when I logged in for work, I see I have an email from him. I've never connected with this student outside of that one email correspondence. And so he responded to the thread from November. That's the first mistake. So when you are connecting with someone for a letter recommendation, it should be a brand new email. And I know that this may sound silly for me to share, but I have to share. You have to put a subject. If you are emailing someone and there is no subject, it feels like there wasn't much effort put into the email. So that's like a red flag for me. If you don't have a subject, if there's not a salutation. So if you're not saying good morning or hi, Amanda, that's a big no-no for me too. And I see it very often where students are connecting with me or sending me emails and no salutations, no email subjects. And so those are like just very simple things that you can do to make sure that you are coming across as professional and that you care, right? That you're committed to this and that you care. And so the second thing he did wrong was he didn't share anything about what program he was applying to. It could have been a job, honestly, I'm not really sure. It was a 2-sentence email. And basically the email just said, hi, Amanda, can you write me a letter recommendation? Thank you so much. Sincerely, the student's name. I knew nothing about the program he was applying to. I didn't know the deadline date that he needed this by. I didn't know what skills he wanted me to talk about in the letter recommendation. Like there were so many things that went wrong. So what we've actually done is we've put together a portfolio of resources. And so I have given you 6 steps into requesting a letter recommendation, because I know oftentimes it's very hard to, or uncomfortable students say, to ask for a letter recommendation. So I give you 6 steps on how to start, or what you need to do in requesting that letter of recommendation. And I also have a sample letter of recommendation request that you can use when trying to connect with a faculty or a direct supervisor in requesting that letter of recommendation. So I'll be able to share that out at the end of today's program so that you all have that. Dr. Glass, anything you want to share? Anything in addition to what I already covered?
I think you did a really nice job, that the person really needs to know you, because admission committees know when someone's getting a mediocre letter of recommendation. And if they can consider one that's very personable and saying this person is, you know, walks on water, they may take that individual over someone who is just a mediocre recommender.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that students forget to attach resume or personal statements. And so you want your recommender to be fully equipped with how to write a more personal letter of recommendation. So you want to include these things when requesting that letter of recommendation. And then deadline too. I'm always like big about deadlines. If you're requesting something from me, please include a deadline so that there's urgency, so that I see that there's urgency on your end. And it also holds me accountable as a recommender, right? To make sure that I'm giving you that letter of recommendation when needed. So that's, again, I'll share out my tips and tricks and letter recommendation request etiquette. But I just wanted to quickly throw that in there.
Well, and I got to add one more thing. Some of the new admission software that they're using for applications have you go in and fill out like an app. You actually fill in like what it would be for an email. So it's an email request, Amy Beth Glass at stockton.edu with, and then it comes across as an electronic form to the recommender. I see a lot of people who leave the form blank. So somebody will get this and won't know the program that you're applying for, or even sometimes the school. So you do want to make sure that even if when it's not as formal as Amanda's speaking of, that you should provide that formality. And one other thing, sometimes letters of recommendation there are on some websites, physical therapy or the healthcare will tell you that they want a letter of recommendation from a faculty member. That should be a full-time faculty member or somebody who has a teaching rank. And if they want it from a physical therapist, you really, if they're very specific, you really should follow the directions in the recommendation section.
I completely agree. Also, I should share, students will use my email address when requesting a letter of recommendation through the system, but not say anything to me. That's also a big no. You should not put someone down as a letter or as a recommender if they have not agreed to it. So when I get those emails, honestly, I'll be completely transparent. I put it right into the trash because that student should have connected with me. That student, and most oftentimes I'm not student facing, so I'm not working with these students individually. But if you do want a letter recommendation, one, I would be the wrong person to write it for you because I can't attest to your skills. I can't speak of what you've done because again, I'm not student facing. So most oftentimes I'm working with the deans of the universities. So when a student's requesting a letter recommendation, if I haven't done direct programming with them, I would be the worst person to ask because again, I can't write you a personalized letter of recommendation. So that's important, is making sure you find the right person. So you want to find the right person that'll say the right things for your letter recommendation. And then personal statements. So for personal statements, if there's a prompt, you want to be sure to answer it. I actually serve on the Scholarships and Awards Committee, and oftentimes we have different prompts for each of these scholarships. And students will not answer the prompt. You can tell that they've like reused this essay. And so I'm like, oh no, like I can't even consider this application because the student didn't answer their prompt. And then how would I validate that they would receive this scholarship or this award when they didn't even answer their prompt? And so that also speaks volumes of what your commitment looks like, right? So, and the dedication that you have for the program. So you want to make sure, again, if there is a prompt, be sure to answer it. Most oftentimes they're just asking you about what are your professional goals? Why do you want to apply to this program? But even if it's very simple questions like that, be sure to include that in your personal statement. And so again, they'll ask you, why are you applying? These are just common questions. So why are you applying? What are your short-term and long-term professional goals? What attracts you to their program? And just mentioning also what's important is what specifically about this program interests you? So why this program and not a program at like Temple University, right? So why? That's so important. For me, it was the curriculum. It was because the curriculum at my program looked and was aligned with my goals. So again, I do have a portfolio of graduate school resources that I'll share out with you all in about a minute. So it'll include letters of recommendation etiquette, resume resources, and just personal statement tips and tricks.
So let's talk about when should we apply. You want it to be as early as possible. My rule of thumb is 6 to 8 weeks before the deadline, and I'm going to tell you a few reasons why. Most of the time, applications are looked at holistically. Holistically meaning they're looking at the entire person. So if I might be weak in one area but stronger in another, that's all going to help me. But the only way they can look at me holistically is if all the materials in the file arrive on time. And we can't, especially during this pandemic sense, we don't know how long it may take to get official transcripts sent. Do I need those official transcripts sent electronically directly to the institution electronically? Do I need them put in an envelope and sent snail mail? There's a variety of different reasons. And I also find that people who do themselves a disservice by applying at the very deadline because maybe the letters of recommendation haven't arrived, maybe the letters of recommenders, there's not time for an institution to chase. If I'm looking at you holistically and I don't have everything when it's time to bring files to a committee, it's very easy because I have such volume that I just move that one to the side and go ahead and send things in. So if you're applying, apply as early as possible. Follow your directions. When Amanda spoke about the personal statement, it reminded me of a few things. If the prompt is, please write in 500 words or less why you'd like to go attend whatever the program is, stick within that 500 words or less. I had committees who would read 500 words in, then they would stop the file review and say, oh, little too long, didn't follow direction, move to the pile, get to the next application. So if they're looking at different things, you don't want to give people reason not to review your application. Transcripts take some of the longest time, but so do letters of recommendation because it depends. If I'm asking a faculty member for a letter of recommendation in a summer month, they may not be at their desk or answering their email until the fall, and I may miss an opportunity. Personal statement, you want someone to proofread, so you want to give yourself plenty of time in that application process. And proofreading is real simple. You want somebody to read it. Did I answer the prompt? Are there any grammatical errors? What other feedback can you give me on this? And where standardized test scores are concerned, don't go into them cold. Something as simple as just reviewing a YouTube video of people who've done it prior to you would be a really good investment of your time. And I often get the thing, well, I'm not a good test taker. I wasn't a good test taker and I have a doctoral degree. So the test is not part of it. It's just to see how you handle certain circumstance. There's a lot of bias in tests, and I'm not a big proponent of advocating, and you'll find that many programs will go away from standardized testing. But you want to know that up front when you're doing your research. And again, if you want to find a program that does, Communication disorders is a great one. There's programs out there that do not require standardized testing, but you have to do the research as to which programs those are. But early as possible, please. There's these CAS applications that are out there that you can get for public health and nursing, dentistry, occupational therapy, physical therapy, communication disorders, just to name a few. And many of those ask for your application to be what's known as verified prior. The verification, that part of it takes, and they'll tell you up on their website, 4 weeks if you want to pay for it, 8 weeks on the back end. A lot of that verification is they go line by line on transcripts and just to verify that they're able to come up with what your actual GPA is. And I think at all points in this process, we want to treat our process like a professional portfolio or even like a professional interview. If I'm calling an admissions office one time during the day and I was really professional, that's great. But if it's a small office and you call the 10th time, they know who you are and they can often track it. And some of that behavioral interviewing is actually part of the admission process, not at Stockton, but I do know some schools that are using behavioral. So they log in every time Amanda calls and what did they think Amanda's disposition was? Then they may check in and also say, did anyone else call on her behalf? Was it, a family member? Because we've had families that have gotten involved. And if you have a question, again, I was that first generation student, run it by one of us before you go ahead and pick the phone up and call. You don't want a parent calling or anything of that nature. And I think we're up to the point where you can ask us questions.
Yeah, I just want to add something to actually. I was randomly looking through my emails and I came across an email from when I was applying to graduate school 2 years ago. And so it's funny that we talk about materials needed. So oftentimes, if the institution does not have all of the required materials, then they can't even see your application. So my email was to the program coordinator. I was confirming that they received all of the materials because it did show that my GRE scores were pending and I sent them directly. So the GRE scores or your standardized tests are usually sent directly to the institution. And so for whatever reason, they never sent my scores and I saw it pending. So I connected with the program coordinator and I asked her, like, hey, what do I have to do to ensure that my GRE scores are received? Do I need to contact them? She was like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad you asked because the deadline for you to apply is next week. And if we don't even see your application unless all of your materials are submitted. So that's so important. That's something I didn't know, honestly, until I was applying, that they can't even see my application. So it's very important to make sure that, one, you are checking the status. It's very easy oftentimes to check the status of your application or even connect with the program coordinator. For me, it was a great way to start my relationship with the program coordinator and just to get more insight of what's her opinion? What should I be doing right now? How should I be preparing just in case I was going to be accepted into the program? So that was really nice. Again, community. Community is so important for me because when I feel more connected and when students feel more connected, then you're going to be more successful. Retention is going to be higher. So that's one thing that I randomly came across and I always try to share because again, they didn't even see that I was applying because my GRE scores. And that's something I thought, I asked them, when I was filling out my GRE forms, I made sure that they were sent to Montclair, but they weren't for whatever reason. We were able to get it sent actually within 2 days, but that's something that I had to do. I had to contact them and make sure that it was sent. So make sure all of your materials are included.
Let's go back to GREs. Some institutions like Stockton has one code that goes directly to campus, to their admission office, and another one that goes directly to the CAS application. So CAS is the centralized application processing, and you need to know what you're applying for and which way you want your scores to go through. And the other thing, another tip is, I know we like to text and we're talking about outreach, but we need to know the culture of the institution. So an institution like Stockton is not really going to let you talk to the program director or to the chair in most larger programs, just for the simple reason of the volume that they're getting. So they may have an admissions person or a counselor that may be the person who you would speak to before you got as far as a program coordinator. So if you're staying local, just keep that in mind. And then my last tip, I had one more tip for you. I lost my train of thought. All right, go ahead. Let's answer questions and it'll come back to me.
So if you want to unmute yourself and ask us any questions, or feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we'll be able to answer those for you. I think this is the perfect opportunity to ask very candid questions. I know for me, I didn't have anyone when I was applying, so I'm also first generation. So I was doing most of it on my own. Thankfully, again, I connected with my program coordinator, so she was able to answer some questions for me. But when I was even like studying for my juries, I had no idea, like, how long do you study for? I was already out of school. So it was 6 years in between my undergraduate degree to my graduate degree. So I'm just grateful for YouTube. I'm grateful for some of my sorority sisters who are also in higher education. So they were able to just give me some tips and tricks, but please, like, take advantage of us as resources today.
Oh, I know the last thing I wanted to mention was if you're using an email account that's the basis of your application, please make sure you're checking that, because I can't tell you how often I've reached out to a student and said, you know, Amy, you're missing a letter of recommendation from the following individual. Please, you know, let us know if you'd like to replace that person with someone else. And no one's ever gotten back. And I've had that same situation where we were trying to give scholarship money out to people. Once people got in, they just didn't feel the need to check their email anymore, and a lot of missed opportunities were there. So make it an email account that you're checking regularly. I know people who open up an email account because they don't want spam and things. Well, maybe don't apply to limit the number of applications versus opening up multiple email accounts.
Good, feel free to unmute yourself. I saw someone raise their hand, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I have a question about, like, is it true that some graduate program just requires you to write a thesis instead of doing a senior seminar?
So that's a great question. Most programs have some sort of capstone experience. So the capstone experience could be everything from a creative project to a thesis to a dissertation. Some master's programs have comps, you know, where you would take a comprehensive exam before you do whatever it is. It depends upon what the rite of passage of those programs are. So that's something to really consider. Are you looking at applying to Stockton, to any particular program?
Yeah, I'm in the dual degree program for MBA and bachelor's in the business studies program.
Okay, so the dual degree for the business program is not going to be, they don't do a thesis, they do a capstone experience.
Capstone, okay.
Yeah, so it's the same type of thing. There'll be academic rigor there. It just all depends upon the discipline.
Thank you. And one more question. Do you recommend students doing independent study? Like, how was your experience, if anyone has done an independent study?
I think an independent study is a phenomenal way to connect with a faculty member in a different type of point of view. Now, not all institutions have that experience, but that is one of the hallmarks that Stockton rests our hat on. So I think an independent study that you can do with someone to gain that valuable experience, it not only helps you personally, but it'll help you professionally as well.
Sounds good. And are you okay with, like, us reaching out to you if we have any questions in the future regarding graduate school?
Love that. That'd be perfect.
I was wondering, what are some of the red flags you see in students' applications? Like, for example, like, as a non-traditional student, do you normally expect like some slip ups or some gaps that, you know, could easily be explained, if that makes sense? Or case of a transfer student, do you
Okay.
expect like, I don't know what is specific, some dangerous red flags, if you could explain that in the application process for, you know, something like a master's program, or, you know, if you have any advice over what's considered to be a competitive applicant, if per se like your GPA/MRE is like terrible, you know?
So a gap in somebody's professional experience is never a red flag to me. It just shows that you have probably experiences that may be different than others. I think some of your more competitive applications are people who may not have gone a traditional route, right? Because everybody brings something to a table. If you speak a different language, if you've had a travel abroad experience, if you have had maybe even a travel abroad that you didn't leave the country with, but you had an experience with an international organization where you were at home. Those are great opportunities. Raising a family, there's nothing wrong with that. And that shows different types of ways of trying to manage your time. So anything can help with the application. Red flags in an application for me were always people who tried to make an excuse for why something was occurring. So if your GPA is not as stellar as you'd like it to be, just own it, right? Embrace it, say what you've learned from it. I mean, not everybody is a perfect student. We see a lot of grade inflation right now. So I'm not going to say that the best 4.0 is always has the best bedside manner, right? We want to be able to relate to those that we're working with and work well with others. Let me see, other red flags in an application. It's more of the behavior that I'm seeing, that I see that you're not actually seeing it, you're experiencing it with phone calls and things when parents call. I've had parents call, pastors call, brothers and sisters call. There's all kinds of bad behavior where that's concerned. You want to be the adult in the process and tell what makes you unique. And many of the times you're only seeing it on paper. If you are given an opportunity to go to an interview, I ask that you dress professionally and you be on time and you use all the etiquette you would have if you were going to a job interview. So a red flag went up one time where someone looked literally like they were drugged behind the back of a bus and they arrived for an interview with one of the healthcare programs. If we want to put you into a healthcare setting, when we were going to put the Stockton name on someone, we want that person to be professional. So that's some red flags. Red flags, I think when things are typed wrong, or when you blatantly lie, because most times we're trying to triangulate information so you can find that. And where you've touted some experience that you really didn't have, that goes back to the lying. But some of that does come out in interviews or other ways, and that's a sure way to get someone, get a denial. So I hope that answered your question.
And so what I would add to that is you can always use your Writing Center on campus to review your application. I know that I did a scholarships 101 program earlier in the semester, and we definitely encourage that. So you want to make sure you're utilizing the resources on campus because they'll be able to look over your application. And oftentimes, sometimes there are people who are like graduate admissions assistants, right? So they'll be able to tell you what they're looking for. So definitely take advantage of not only Dr. Glass today, because you have someone who has so much experience, but also the resources on your campus, so the Writing Center.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Azra, Dominique, Heather, and Maya for filling out the survey. If you want all the resources that was discussed today, please fill out the survey. We will drop the link back into the chat.
I had a question. Compared to the undergraduate level classes, like how difficult is a master's level class, and how much time would you have to put for a class?
Well, that's a great question. If we use the Stockton jargon, undergrads are taking, say, there are 4 credit classes and you take 12 credits or more a semester. In grad school, depending upon the program, it's going to depend upon how many credits. But I always say you're more cautious if you're 9 or under, but that depends upon other circumstances. Are you working full-time? Are you working part-time? Do you have a family? Do you have caregiving responsibilities? You want to take all of that into account, because grad school, I say, is like your senior year on steroids. And sometimes you're doing something very quickly. And as you're doing that very quickly, you might only have 2 years to shine. So less is more, but then that could have some financial impact. So we have to, it's not going to be the same prescribed per individual. And I know that I wrote down, as Amanda was talking, the state of New Jersey says that in order for it to be a graduate degree, it needs to be 30 credits or more. But that could be 30 to 85, depending upon the discipline. And if you talk doctoral, it could be 30 to 110. So it all depends upon the program and how long it's going to be. If you're in a program that is like a lockstep and they have to have so many credits per term, they've taken into account. So I can't really give you an exact number, But I can say that it's different from everybody, and it all depends if you're going to be doing an assistantship, if you're working full-time. There's lots that goes into that. Amanda, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I am a full-time grad student. So I did full-time for 2 years and I work full-time. Also, my job requires that I travel at least once a month before the pandemic. So honestly, when Dr. Glass says it's senior year on steroids, that's what it felt like to me. Thankfully, I am single, so I don't have any children. So on weekends, honestly, I would be in Barnes and Noble from 10 a.m. when they open until 8 p.m., Saturday and Sunday. And that is because I had class 2 to 3 times a week. So once I was working from 8 to 5, I would rush over to campus. So I was driving from work to campus, and then I would do classes from 5:30 till 8:30. So by the time you get home, you're exhausted. You don't want to do homework. You don't want to do your readings. Readings are so important. As an undergrad, I was a psychology major. I sped read. I want to say that I sped read. You can't do that in graduate school. So, and also the class sizes are so much smaller. So if you didn't read, the professor is gonna know. And it's a different kind of commitment that they expect. So it's not okay to show up to class and not have read and understood or have questions about the readings. And my program specifically is very like heavy. Like, so you are reading a lot of articles, you are reading a lot of theories. So it sometimes takes 1 or 2, like 2 or 3 times reading the content to really understand it. And so for me, I would say that agreed, it is senior year on steroids, but it took up probably at least like 25 to 30 hours a week for me. Because again, I was in class about 10 hours a week, and then I'm spending at least another 10 hours outside of the classroom doing homework or catching up on, or not catching up, but reading, and then any assignments. So it's possible for sure. I think what has made my experience just incredible overall is the support that I have. Not only the support from my program and the faculty members, but also from my direct supervisor and the president of our company, right? So I shared what my goals were 4 years ago when I started with the company. So they always knew that, you know, I wanted to work in higher education. I want to go back to school. So sharing those goals very early on, it wasn't a surprise when I shared with them, okay, so I'm doing it. I'm jumping into this program. It wasn't a surprise, and they're very supportive. I actually get to leave 30 minutes early when I have class, and they don't take it out of my PTO. It's not taken out of, like, I'm salary based, so it's not taken out of my paychecks. So that's really nice. And that, like, when we're talking about support, that is literally they're putting their money where their mouth is with supporting me. So I think that that has just honestly made the experience, and even like my cohort. So having the support of my cohort, I don't feel crazy, because sometimes I feel like, oh my goodness, am I the only one stressing out? Like, am I the only one who doesn't get this? Like, do all these theories make sense? But when you have like a community and a cohort and friends that are also in the program, and I knew no one going in, but we were able to like build a connection. And when I'm feeling stressed out, we have a group chat when I'm feeling stressed out, or when I'm feeling, you know, checked out, because Zoom fatigue is very real, especially right now. I can count on them to remotivate me, to inspire me, to bring me back in on why I'm doing this in the first place. So I know I talked about community a lot, but it's honestly my community that has gotten me here.
I think something I should have specified early on too is the bachelor's degree provides you with a, you kind of dabble in different courses, and we get a general overview of whatever the topic is. When you go to the graduate program, and I'm using that affectionately, master's and doctoral, they're expecting you to become an expert in whatever it is. So there's great expectations at the end of that degree. So the amount of time that you're putting in because you need to be that expert at the end of it. If somebody came up to Amanda on the street and said, what was DEI? And she couldn't tell us what that was, that would be a really, you know, someone would back up and say, excuse me, do you know what I mean? And if they couldn't, if I didn't understand what persistence was and what the importance of retention was, then I'd have that same problem. So you just have to remember that you become that expert in the field.
Okay, awesome. So we'll start wrapping this up. I know we have one more question. someone raised their hand. So feel free to ask your question and then we'll wrap up today's event.
Should you say the standardized test score or like scores like GMAT or GRE plays like a large role in a graduate application? Because I can relate to Dr. Glass as not being the best test taker, and that's something I worry.
Excellent question. So let's talk a little bit about some things, some perks at Stockton. Some programs have direct entry. So if you have a certain GPA at the end of it, you want to do Google direct entry on the Stockton website. So if you're ending your collegiate career and you're within a year of graduation and you have a certain GPA, they'll most likely waive most of the application requirements for you. We consider you to be family, and that's a perk that families get. But that's not for all. So if you were going from, say, an undergrad in biology and you wanted to pursue physical therapy, that's not an option. But if you're going from business to business, that would actually occur. And if you're a dual degree student, in many cases, you don't have to apply. So that would be another perk of being a dual degree student. And then I would look for the program to see whether or not I needed those standardized tests. Okay, sometimes you can go ahead and take a course as a non-degree seeking student to prove that you can handle grad work and put together that professional portfolio, and they'll waive those tests there. So depending upon what you want to do, it's good questions to ask. But if they're looking at you holistically, they're looking at the whole person. So they do understand that there's different, not everybody is going to have the same life experience. Not everybody's going to have the same test scores, and not everybody's going to have the same path from a baccalaureate degree into grad school. So, but again, it's the holistic approach. If an institution was using something other than a holistic approach, for me personally, that would not be someplace I would apply. So if you're thinking of where you want to go, we could sit and like actually tease out specifically what you want. Because again, it might not be for everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll wrap up tonight's event. Thank you everyone so much for attending. Thank you, Dr. Glass, for co-facilitating with me. You were just such a wealth of resource and knowledge, and I'm sure it's being felt. I'm going to drop the link in again into the chat for the survey. Please fill it out. We'll make sure to email you all of the resources that I also put into the chat once you complete the survey. But again, thank you everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Thank you so much.